This Sunday, the outsider, North Dakota's Governor Doug Burgum, is outspending all of his Republican presidential rivals after entering the race just 4 weeks ago.
I believe that the President of the United States has got a defined set of things they're supposed to work on, and it's not every culture war topic.
Can this little-known former software executive break through and win over Republican primary voters? Did you ever do business with Donald Trump?
I don't think so.
Why?
I just think that it's important that you're judged by the company you keep.
My exclusive interview from Fargo. Plus, Biden's economy.
Bidenomics is just another way of saying restoring the American dream.
President Biden crafts his campaign economic message.
Bidenomics means you pay more for everything in life.
I can't think of anything more un-American than what we're seeing in Biden's economy.
Does Biden even need an economic message to win in 2024, or will issues like abortion matter more? I'll ask New Jersey's Democratic Governor, Phil Murphy. And civilian risk. The U.S. plans to send cluster munitions to Ukraine, despite concerns they could kill civilians. Why is a weapon that's banned by over 100 countries the best option now for Ukraine?
It was a very difficult decision on my part. The Ukrainians are running out of ammunition.
And joining me for insight and analysis are NBC News senior Capitol Hill correspondent Garrett Haake, Amna Nawaz, co-anchor of PBS NewsHour, Republican strategist Brendan Buck, and former Democratic Senator Claire McCaskill. Welcome to Sunday. It's Meet the Press.
From NBC News in Washington, the longest-running show in television history, this is Meet the Press with Chuck Todd.
And a good Sunday morning to all of you out there. With the Iowa caucuses just 6 months away, mark your calendars for January 15th, officially, by the way. The two parties are debating what the coming campaign is going to be about, the intensifying culture wars or a referendum on the economy. President Biden is hoping to claim credit for what is an improving economy. He's ramping up a messaging tour focused on the economic agenda that he is embracing and calling Bidenomics. Inflation has dropped for 11 straight months, from a high of 9.1% in June of last year to 4% this May. Unemployment stands at 3.6%. That is near a 50-year low. And 13 million jobs have been added since Biden took office. We've completely recovered from the pandemic drop. But the American public is not feeling it. Just 34% of Americans approve of Biden's handling of the economy in a recent AP poll that was released at the end of June. And only 20% of voters believe the nation is on the right track, though voters have not felt good about the direction of the country for over a decade. And Biden is trying to persuade voters that the economy is better than they think it is.
And guess what? Bidenomics is working. I'm not here to declare victory on the economy. I'm here to say we have a plan that's turning things around quickly. It's about growing the economy from the middle out and the bottom up. Today's job shows that, jobs report shows that Bidenomics is working.
Now, this is actually a familiar pivot for incumbent Democratic presidents in the last 30 years. Both Bill Clinton and Barack Obama had to make the case that their economic policies were working to a skeptical public as they were vying for a second term. And it's a necessary pivot for the Biden campaign. But ultimately, it could end up being that the culture war issues, like abortion, that Democrats end up rallying around, especially as the Republican Party continues to focus even more time on cultural issues.
School bureaucrats do not know better than parents. We've got to go and defeat them from the ground up and let them know that we are not going to have this indoctrination in there.
We are going to end men joining women's teams.
Identifying Donald Trump as really being a pioneer in injecting gender ideology into the mainstream, where he was having men compete against women in his beauty pageants.
And in fact, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who's trailing Donald Trump by 30 points in many national primary matchups, continues to try to run to the right of Trump on these social issues like abortion and LGBTQ rights. In fact, this week, DeSantis' rapid response team reposted a video on Twitter attacking Trump for formally expressing support for the LGBTQ community. The video was criticized even by Republicans and has since been taken down. Now, one Republican candidate, who is already outspending all of his rivals right now in advertising in Iowa and New Hampshire, is betting that there is a lane for a Republican candidate that is solely focused on the economy and national security rather than on what he calls anti-wokeness. On Friday, I traveled to Fargo, North Dakota, and I sat down with the governor of North Dakota, Doug Burgum. He's a 66-year-old former software exec and a two-term governor. And yes, he is self-funding much of his presidential campaign right now. In April, Burgum signed a law that did ban abortion at 6 weeks. And he has signed 8 bills into law that has been pushed by his very conservative legislature that limits the rights of transgender North Dakotans. But at the same time, he is arguing that Republicans will do better in 2024 if they focus solely on pocketbook issues. Governor Burgum, welcome to Meet the Press.
Chuck, great to be here, and special gratitude from all of us in North Dakota for you and your team traveling all the way to Fargo.
We love being here. So let me start. Every write-up of your candidacy and the focus that you've put on your presidential, on the issues you want to focus on, and what you say is that what the silent majority cares about. Every analyst seems to end their analysis of your campaign with, boy, this is a campaign that would make a lot more sense in the 1990s or in the Mitt Romney era of the Republican Party. What say you to that?
Well, first of all, I would describe them not as silent but exhausted. There's a broad spectrum of Americans that are really frustrated with the discourse that's happening at the edge. And part of the reason they're frustrated is because there aren't candidates, there aren't choices on the ballot to talk about the things that matter to them. And when the First Lady and I are in New Hampshire, in Iowa, or here in North Dakota, where we've been leading the last 6.5 years, the things that people are concerned about, price of food in the table, the price of gas at the pump, and you wouldn't think that in North Dakota maybe that national security would be front of mind, but whether it's Chinese spy balloons, whether it's the price of soybeans and tariffs, or whether it's China building spy bases, these three things, economy, energy policy and national security are the things that people really care about, and they touch every American. And they don't just touch Republicans, they touch independents, they touch Democrats. If we can unleash the best of America, if we can get our economy sprinting instead of crawling, that lifts the boat for everybody. We know that. That's always been. And when we are in a Cold War in China, we just won't admit it. But the way you work your way through a Cold War is you win it economically.
Your message makes a lot of sense for the middle of the electorate, but you're having to win a Republican nomination first. And you have firsthand experience. You have a legislature that is not focused on the issues you're focused on, but they're focused on all these cultural issues that the primary electorate seems to be focused on. So how do you talk the Republican primary voters into your vision?
Well, I think we know a little bit about winning Republican primaries because we've won 2 here in North Dakota in a state that is...
it's an open primary state. So
yep.
You've had independent. You can have, in most of these Republican primary contests, independent, other than New Hampshire, independents and Democrats don't get to participate.
And New Hampshire is a very important state. So it is an opportunity here, again, for this exhausted majority to say, look, there's so many people in our country that don't want to rerun at the presidential race of what we had in 2020. It's not up to the pundits.
Let me ask you this:
voters.
How do you explain Donald Trump's hold on the GOP?
Well, I would leave that. There's a whole industry that talks incessantly, nonstop about these kinds of questions.
But you're running to lead this party. And in order for you to become the leader of this party, you've got to understand why the current leader has this hold on constituents that you want to lead. What's your diagnosis?
Well, here in North Dakota, people that voted for Donald Trump also voted for us. And so we know a lot about Donald Trump voters. But we also know that Republican primary voters, they want to win in 2024. And how we're going to win is we will present ourselves when we get to next January, next February, when the voting starts, is that we have the best chance of beating Joe Biden.
How much should character count when it comes to running for office?
It should count enormously, particularly when you're talking about the jobs of being a governor or being a president, because the executive branch, different from the other branches, but specifically legislative, if you're a legislator, you put on your jersey, you fight for your side, you vote oftentimes along party lines. If you don't vote with the party, you vote at your peril. The President of the United States, as this balancing third branch, is the one that's supposed to unite people. It's supposed to bring people together, supposed to paint a vision about a powerful, positive future. And somehow we've gone astray on that, where the presidency has also become hyper-partisan, no matter which party is in office.
You ever lied in politics?
No.
That you know of? You don't believe you've ever lied?
No.
You'll be fact-checked on that, I'm sure, throughout the campaign.
I'm sure we will. I mean, it's a... but
you feel like you've always told the truth as you understood it?
Yeah, absolutely. That's how I was raised, and that's how I've gone forward.
Do you think Donald Trump's elevation to the presidency is proof that character is counted or not?
Well, I grew up in a town of 300 people, Arthur, North Dakota. Mm-hmm. In a town like that, and the business that my grandparents started was the grain elevator business.
Right.
And the grain elevator business, farmers bring you grain. Every truck they bring you take a sample. And in that sample, the way you take that sample, you can have, is it going to be 99% wheat and 10% or 1% chaff, or is it going to be 95% wheat and 5% chaff?
That's money in the pocket.
Every transaction, you build trust on every transaction. When I was about 6 years old, my dad walked me up in the driveway of the elevator, and he said, this is how we take the cleanest possible sample. This is how we get the highest amount of wheat and the least amount of chaff when we take that sample, because if we don't, this family is going to haul their grain 6 miles down the road to the other community.
Would you ever do business with Donald Trump?
I don't think so.
Why?
I just think that it's important that you're judged by the company you keep, and
You just wouldn't do business with him?
No, I wouldn't.
I feel like you've signed a lot of bills that your legislature's put on your desk that you're not crazy about, but you've signed them anyway because you've made the argument they can override my veto. And on some things, you do choose to stand up and veto. And I guess I'm trying to figure out, and we'll get into some details, what's your line of when you decide, well, I'm going to issue this veto, they're going to override me, but I want to make a statement, versus, I don't like this bill, they're going to override me, so I'm going to let it go.
Well, every governor has got to deal with the legislature they're dealt with. In North Dakota, we've got a legislature that's 90-10, 90% Republican, 10% the other party, and some in the other party feel the same way the Republicans do. So it's a little bit like a uniparty in North Dakota.
Do you wish it were more politically diverse?
Well, I think that we want to make sure that all voices are heard. I think every state legislature is really slanted. Ours is like 80% men, 20% women. I think you might have different outcomes across all state legislators if you had more women involved. If we had more youth, the age, people say, hey, I'm young, I'm building a family, I can't do it. So the average age in North Dakota is 35. That's the average age in the legislature is older. North Dakota is 50-50 men and women. That's not our legislature. But that's the same across the whole country.
So let's take abortion, the 6-week ban. A voter wants to know what your position is on abortion. I understand the law. It doesn't sound like this is the law you would have designed, but it's the law you signed. So what is your position on abortion?
Well, my position is that I support the Dobbs decision, and this is a decision that should be left to the states. And what's going to pass in North Dakota is not ever going to pass in California, New York, and wouldn't even pass in the state of Minnesota. And that's why I'm on the record saying that I would not sign a federal abortion ban.
You would not sign any federal legislation at all, whether it set the line at 24 weeks or 6 weeks?
No, I wouldn't, because it should be left to the states. Now, I think people can say Republicans are extreme. I personally think that having a late-term abortion, having an abortion one day before a child is born, that's abhorrent to me. Some states allow that. I think that's extreme, but states get to decide where they want to fit on that spectrum.
Where are you on this?
The states created the federal government, not the other way around.
Where are you on this?
Where I'm at is I believe in states' rights. And I believe that the President of the United States has got a defined set of things they're supposed to work on, and it's not every culture war topic. These are things that are left to the state. As president, things that you're supposed to focus on, things like the economy, like energy policy, which is completely tied to national security, and part of national security is the border, and these are things that the president right now, President Biden, has completely abdicated his responsibility on. Every state's become a border state. 110,000 overdose deaths in this country last year again. That's a statistic, but that's 330 a day.
Let me ask you this. You're a limited government guy, but you're legislating science in this case. You comfortable with that? You're legislating when a doctor can get involved and when somebody can get a medical intervention on their own decision. Are you comfortable with the government setting those limits?
Well, I'm comfortable with those battles happening at the state level, because if people don't like them, they've got an opportunity to get engaged and try to change that. At the federal level, it's not anything I'm going to be pushing, because I believe in freedom and liberty, and I believe that if we believe that as a party, then we have to think long and hard about, if we believe in freedom and liberty, then why are we trying to restrict certain things as a party. We should be the Freedom and Liberty Party, and we should believe in the states' rights party, and you have to have some consistency around it.
So you're not going to sign any abortion bills, you're not going to sign any transgender bills, you're going to stay out of every cultural issue if you get elected president?
Anytime that, when I was in the private sector and I had a chance to start from the tiniest startup, less than 10 people, build that into a 2,000-person company, I then had an opportunity to work at large global companies. Anytime you're the CEO, if you're spending time on something that can be done, in a, sales office, out on the front lines dealing with customers, you're not doing your job. You got to be looking to the future. We need a president that's focused on the challenges that we're being faced as a nation, not a president that's going to decide whether a book is in the right section or not in a library in a small town somewhere in America. That is and that's part of what was going wrong now. The reason why we've got issues with our economy, with our energy policy, with national security that are just raft is because we are somehow, through culturally, media, whatever, trapping the presidency or expecting them to weigh in on every single thing. It's not the place that a CEO should be spending their time. It's definitely not the place where the president should be spending their time.
How would you select a Supreme Court nominee? Would you have any litmus tests?
I have had an incredible opportunity as governor to appoint judges. Somehow through the fate of baby boomers retiring, I'm the 33rd governor of North Dakota. I just yesterday was working through the decision process for my 18th judge appointment, 2 of those at the North Dakota Supreme Court, the others at district judges. And we don't have litmus tests. We try to find the people that are most qualified to do the job. And I think that, again, if there is any kind of litmus test, it's are they going to follow the Constitution and follow the law and not legislate from the bench? I mean,
do you care what the Federalist Society thinks of a nominee? Are you going to? Donald Trump outsourced all of his Supreme Court nominees to the Federalist Society. If they didn't have their stamp of approval, is that important to you?
Like I said, I have interviewed thousands and thousands of people in my life for jobs. I think that the process of selecting people for a job also depends on the team as well as the individual. And this is who wins the Super Bowl. People that win the Super Bowl are people that have the right team on the field. And if that opportunity comes forward, that's one of the biggest responsibilities of the president. But I think my track record of picking people of high character, high integrity, every company I've ever been involved with, I've been surrounded by people of exceptional talent, exceptional commitment, exceptional character. I don't think that's going to change. And whether it's in the administration, whether it's cabinet leaders, or whether it's appointing federal judges at any level, that's not going to change.
Is there one thing President Biden has done that you think has been a good thing?
Well, I'm struggling there because, again, as a governor, what I've seen in terms of the overreach of the federal government is, and my heart goes out. I mean,
I thought you might say the infrastructure bill, since there was support in your own state.
Well, I mean, and I could okay.
But I don't know whether you ascribe that to him. It doesn't sound like you do.
Initially, I'm like, hey, as a person that spent time in software, and we had a tremendous dependence on foreign manufacturers for chips. The CHIPS Act started out like a great idea, and people said, and as governor, I'd say, hey, I never comment on a bill till it's on my desk in its final form. And people said, wow, we're going to try to get onshoring for critical aspects of what we need, for communications, for transportation, for military equipment. That made a bunch of sense. Well, then you pile a bunch of ideology on top of that and say, well, you can get these dollars to help onshore here, but you've got to use union, you've got to do this, you've got to do that, and you pile your ideology on.
2 more policy questions. Xi, we've talked about China a little bit. Is he a dictator?
Absolutely.
So you agree with President Biden on that one? He called him a dictator, and China got offended by this. How would you have handled that moment?
Well, I'd call him a brutal dictator. Look at their the rights record that they have. So that's a.
And where do you put Vladimir Putin?
I think he's running a large criminal organization, and I think we're seeing the tip of that with the Wagner Group. I mean, it's like we can't think of Russia today under Putin like a country.
You see it almost more as like a mob.
Absolutely.
A criminal syndicate works.
Well, the Wagner Group was operating, 65 shell companies all over the world. I mean, they control gold mines in the Central African Republic. When they're down helping out in Syria, there's contracts where they took over 25% of the oil production in Syria. That's a large criminal organization.
Right. So in President Burgum administration, does Ukraine support change?
Well, we have to win the war in Ukraine. I mean, period. We have to do that. And it's unfortunate that we're even in this spot. I've said many times before I even announced, we wouldn't be in this spot if we hadn't allowed our allies, and think about all the Americans. We talked earlier, we've both been to Normandy. Think about all the Americans that died fighting in World War II. And then we adopted a policy where we're trying to shut down the U.S. energy policy, shut down the U.S. energy industry so that all of Western Europe can be dependent on Russia for their oil and gas. That's what allowed, that gave him...
That's quite the dotted line. You think our shutting down our energy industry pushed Europe towards Russia?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, they were completely dependent on Russian oil and gas. I mean, German manufacturing is off 25%.
They made a choice to be dependent on Russia. I mean, the idea that they had no choice, they made a choice, Germany did.
Right, but we had up until till just recently, we had an oil export ban. We've still got the Jones Act. We have a bunch of red tape and regulation that's completely outdated. If you care about the environment, you should want every drop of energy produced in the United States. We produce it cleaner, safer than anyone else.
Governor Burgum, I have more questions, but I don't have more time. Thanks for your time.
Chuck, thank you for being here.
As you might expect, there's a lot more to that interview. You can see the entire unedited version of that interview with Governor Doug Burgum right now at meetthepress.com. You can either see it or listen to it. When we come back, President Biden makes his sales pitch on the economy. Is Bidenomics a winning message and strategy? I'll ask New Jersey's Democratic Governor, Phil Murphy, next. Welcome back. President Biden, saddled by questions about his age and his ability to do the job for another 4 years, has been sharpening his economic message, and he's arguing that the economy is improving. Voters just don't realize it. As inflation remains high and voters disapprove of the president's performance on the economy, the Biden campaign hopes that this strong employment picture and focus on the middle class could break through with this voter pessimism about the direction of the country. So joining me now is Democratic Governor Phil Murphy of New Jersey. He was, for what it's worth, once considered a potential presidential candidate himself, had Biden decided not to seek a second term. Murphy, of course, is now a member of the Biden-Harris Campaign National Advisory Board, so there's no more talk of that. Governor Murphy, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Greetings from the Jersey Shore, Chuck. Great to be with you.
I appreciate that. Let me start with this idea of Bidenomics. As you know, the public doesn't believe that this administration is doing well on the economy. Obviously, you believe differently. Why do you think voters don't buy into Bidenomics yet?
Yeah, I think there's a lead lag factor here, Chuck. First of all, the facts speak for themselves. 13 million jobs created. I think unemployment below 4% for the longest stretch in 50 years. It's a middle class, a middle out, bottom up approach. I look back at 40 years ago this summer. Even the great communicator himself, Ronald Reagan, was struggling to get the message through that the economy had already begun its recovery in the previous year. Ultimately, he went on to a landslide victory the next year. I'm not sure it's going to be a landslide, but the facts are on the side of the president and his administration, and I think eventually that seeps into the general sense of how the economy is.
Do you think this pessimism, though, is driven by the fact that the most likely voters, the people that pay the most attention, nearly 20% of our electorate are retirees, right? And so the cost of living increases impact them more than those that are currently working. Not to say this doesn't impact everybody, but in some ways, a retiree is more sensitive to inflationary issues than somebody in the working world. And as you know, they're the most likely voter. How do you bridge that divide?
Yeah, I think your premise is exactly right. In fact, we just signed a budget with a massive property tax relief explicitly for seniors. Tomorrow, I'm going to sign a bunch of bills capping prescription drug prices for seniors again. But the facts, I think, in the Biden administration also speak to the reality that inflation is here. There's no question. But the United States over the past year is the leading deflationary country in the developed world. So I would say help is on the way, and there's an enormous focus I know, by the president and his team on seniors and affordability as there is here in Jersey.
But as you know, it looks like the stubborn inflation numbers mean we're going to have more interest rate hikes. And before you were in public service, you were in the finance world, you know what this means. A rise in interest rates is going to mean harder to get a car loan, harder to get that is not how you create the conditions to convince people the economy is humming.
Yeah, although I have to say I'm not sure that the Federal Reserve has much choice. There's no question you raise interest rates another 25 or 50 basis points, there's short-term pain. You're absolutely right. But that pain is very small as compared to if inflation is allowed to reemerge and stay with us for many years. Sadly, that's tough medicine. But, we're coming out of a pandemic, all of the extraordinary, unique realities associated with that. At a certain point in that respect, you may have no choice.
Let me ask you about where we're coming in the general election. If this is a referendum, do you think the Democrats can avoid this being a referendum on Joe Biden's presidency? Or do you think that's a good thing if it's a referendum on Joe Biden's presidency?
Well, I certainly think it's a good thing if it's based on the track record, which is outstanding. We've talked about the economy. I think that story only gets better. His foreign policy, particularly leading the coalition against this brutal war of aggression by Russia, has been a masterclass. Sadly, I think folks vote more. They vote less on that front, but it's a reality. Those are two very powerful engines. And I think when the facts are on your side, I'd rather be playing that hand than a hand that doesn't have the facts on their side and is making a lot of noise.
Do you believe that Donald Trump presents the best contrast for Joe Biden's reelection? Or are there other candidates that you think would be easier for Joe Biden to face?
I don't know that. I think this, Chuck. I believe a strong economy and a powerful foreign policy hand, and the president has exhibited both. I think that's a winning hand no matter who they're up against. I'm not suggesting it's a runaway election like it was in 1984, but if you've got those two engines on your side, that to me is a winning hand no matter who you're up against.
A couple of quick political stories. On the Supreme Court, do you think it's time for Democrats to embrace this idea of changing how the court works, adding justices, term limits, or do you try to deal with the system that you have rather than change the system?
Yeah, as painful as this radical court has been, taking away rights and freedoms, I'm in the camp that you play within the rules. And I have to say that's a tough conclusion given the extremity of whether it's LGBTQ decisions, abortion, student loans, affirmative action, one gut punch after another. I think you still play within the rules.
The largest ever transportation grant from the federal government is coming to the tri-state area. $7 billion for this second tunnel in the most trafficked area in the country. This was a new tunnel for trains that was on the books to start being built in 2009. The project began. Chris Christie, your predecessor, killed it, decided to say no to this. Is this decision reaffirm Governor Christie's decision at the time, or is this going to now cost New Jersey taxpayers more?
Now, listen, the biggest policy mistake of the past 50 years in New Jersey was his decision to cancel the predecessor to this project. This is a game changer, and this is overwhelmingly supported by federal money. The tunnels that exist were built in 1910. They've been damaged severely over the years. This is 2 new rail tunnels under the Hudson River. It's a game changer for New Jersey commuters. But tragically, the project that was canceled by my predecessor would have been opened 5 years ago. So we're going to get it, but it's sadly later than it should have been.
And does it cost more money now?
Oh, it definitely costs more money. But we have no choice. This is the most congested. This is 20% of the American economy rides on these rails, and thousands of commuters from New Jersey go into New York every day. We have no choice.
Governor Phil Murphy, Democrat of New Jersey, appreciate you coming on and spending your Sunday morning with us. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chuck.
The Supreme Court ruling banning affirmative action in college admissions late last month reversed a precedent that had shaped academia for decades. In my very first sit-down with Donald Trump back in 2015, I asked Mr. Trump for his take on this policy. His answer might surprise you. Take a listen. Affirmative action. Should we keep it? Yes or no?
I'm fine with affirmative action. I mean,
should it be expanded or should be limited?
Well, it should be, you have to also go free market, you have to go capability, you have to do a lot of things, but I'm fine with affirmative action. We've lived with it for a long time, and I've lived with it for a long time, and I've had great relationships with lots of people, so I'm fine with it.
Should private companies be able to fire people because they're gay?
Well, it's a big discussion, and I guess it's getting a lot of negative rulings right now, that whole thing, and I'm willing to go with what the courts are saying.
And that is, you don't think a private company should be able to do that?
I don't think it should be a reason, no. I don't think it should be a reason.
It's nearly 8 years ago. When we come back, why Republicans are embracing the culture wars over the economy on the campaign trail. Panel is next.
I believe in states' rights. And I believe that the President of the United States has got a defined set of things they're supposed to work on, and it's not every culture war topic.
Welcome back. Panelists here. I'm Amna Navaz, co-anchor of PBS NewsHour, our NBC News senior Capitol Hill correspondent Garrett Haake, Brendan Buck, the former advisor to House Speakers Paul Ryan and John Boehner, and former Democratic Senator Claire McCaskill, who is here before two-a-days begin for Pat Mahomes.
There you go.
It's good to see you. Let me start with you, Brendan Buck, because you heard what Governor Burgum said. Now, let me play this exchange between Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis.
DeSantis, as I call him, the abbreviation, is a globalist sellout, and Paul Ryan and Karl Rove, acolyte, who's in the pocket of Wall Street donors at the Club for No Growth.
Donald Trump has spent over $20 million attacking me. That's more than he spent supporting Republican candidates in last year's midterm elections.
So Doug Burgum's message just feels like, is that a fish out of water messaging compared to what DeSantis and Trump have decided to do?
Well, I got to say, DeSantis' answer there was a bit of the most Washington answer I've ever heard, talking about fundraising and attacks. But in the bigger picture, yes, Trump and DeSantis are fighting the culture war, and I think that's what Republican voters want right now. I talk to a lot of Republicans who are like, how do we break out of this cycle? What do we do? We need to put out a 10-point plan to remind people what we're for. And that's really answering a question that nobody's asking. Republican voters don't care about your policy right now. They want to know that you're a fighter. They want to know you're fighting for them. They want to know that you see that the world, the threat that they see coming from Washington, and you're going to stand there with them.
Gary, your first job for us here at NBC was to cover Mitt Romney.
That's right.
And I felt like I was talking to his younger brother there a little bit. He even has the salt and pepper feel to it.
He could be a sixth Romney son.
Exactly. And I don't say that as a criticism,
no.
But even Mitt Romney realized a business-only approach wasn't going to work. And he awkwardly tried to embrace some social issues. It didn't work.
Yeah, he got to it too late. And that was a big debate within his campaign of how much he should just be the economic Mr. Fix-It and how much he should engage on these other issues. Look, I think Brendan kind of touched on what to me is the key issue here. It's not about culture wars. The operative word here is wars, right? It's the fight. And this has been Donald Trump's superpower all along, I think, in this primary, is that he has cultivated the right enemies. He can fight the Biden DOJ. He can fight the left. He can kind of pick the enemy of the moment and make it all about how they are going after him. DeSantis tries to do that, even in that clip you played, the idea that Trump is the enemy. Right. That's not going to work. Trump has spent the last 8 years in the public eye cultivating all the correct enemies to Republican primary voters, and I think that's a big reason he's got the lead that he has.
Claire, how nervous would you be if somebody like Doug Burgum suddenly ended up with the Republican nomination? If Republican primary voters said, whoa, hey, let's go with somebody who's going to do that.
Well, would he be a stronger candidate than Trump? Candidly, he probably would. Because what Trump and DeSantis haven't figured out is they have to win a general. Neither one of those people are growing the number of voters they need to win.
It's like just the opposite.
It's just the opposite. Yeah. Their sliver is shrinking. And the culture wars, I got to tell you, this time around, bring it. Because I think that Democrats want to talk about abortion and they want to talk about guns.
I was just going to say, yes, they did the messaging, but this felt, I'm with Claire here. I don't think they're going to run on Bidenomics. I think they're going to say it. I think they're going to do it to appease Bernie Sanders, who says you should run on the economy.
Yeah.
But I think they're going to run on abortion and guns.
Sanders, by the way. I think the economy is a huge part of their message. They need something that tries to capture all the many things that they've done, including the Infrastructure Act and the Inflation Reduction Act and the CHIPS Act. All of those things are trying to get it all under one big umbrella. And look, White House officials will tell you it's not that it has to be all the way fixed by the time people are voting. They just want it to be trending better. They think that is definitely a strong message that voters will be voting on. But absolutely, you're going to see Vice President Harris out much more talking about issues like abortion rights, talking about voting rights, talking about those issues that we know they've been messaging on, more cultural, social things. That's going to be just as big a message for them.
Yeah. How would you be handling the economic messaging here? Because voters don't believe it. What would you be telling people in Missouri?
I think that fundamentally voters do understand that we have very, very low unemployment. They see it in their families, that everybody has jobs, everybody can get jobs, their jobs are paying slightly better. If I were them, I would not try to sell the whole economic picture. I would just talk about what politicians always talk about. Jobs, 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 jobs. And with the infrastructure bill, they can do the same thing. Jobs, 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 jobs. So jobs, guns, and abortion.
All right. I want to pivot back to the Republican race because this is like the umpteenth week in a row, Brendan, where we're saying, is Ron DeSantis losing? The Wall Street Journal called it stalling. Well, Ron DeSantis is acknowledging that he's struggling. But listen, you talked about a Washington answer before. Listen to this answer on rationalizing what's going on with his campaign.
Well, I think if you look at the people like the corporate media, who are they going after? Who do they not want to be the nominee? They're going after me. Who's the president of Mexico attacking because he knows we'll be strong on the border and hold him accountable in the cartels? He's going after me. So I think if you look at all these people that are responsible for a lot of the ills in our society, they're targeting me as the person they don't want to see as the candidate.
This feels like an attempt to do what Donald Trump does a lot better than he does, is be the martyr.
Yeah, I've always agreed with what Garrett said about making enemies. And Ron DeSantis has made a lot of enemies, and he's very good at getting people on the left to dislike him.
He used to be the best person around to pick a fight.
Absolutely.
He knew how to pick a fight.
It worked for him. But at some point when you're running for president, you need more than that. And you need to be able to connect with people. And I think this is what's missing with Ron DeSantis. And I think we've seen it in years past. There's a lot of comparisons to Scott Walker and Jeb Bush. And I think one of the biggest problems with them was they were a little dull. And I think what we're seeing is Ron DeSantis gets out here and people are seeing him more and more. Yeah. He doesn't make people feel anything. Whatever you care about Donald Trump, he makes you feel something. Ron DeSantis seems to lack that.
You know, Garrett, I saw that Glenn Youngkin made sure that he has checked the box and sent National Guard troops to the border. I think it's sort of a perfunctory thing. You don't want to be the Republican governor that didn't. There's a reason that the Brian Kemp and Glenn Youngkin rumors don't go away. It's due to DeSantis' performance, is it not?
Right. I mean, there's a significant element of the Republican electorate and the Republican donor class who desperately want there to be someone to give a credible challenge to Donald Trump. And the theory was that that was always going to be Ron DeSantis. And if not him, who? Is it somebody who's already in this field, or does the field expand yet again? Now, it's getting awfully late in the year for something like that to happen. But every bad DeSantis poll story, every awkward DeSantis clip on television opens that door a little bit wider for someone else in this theoretical field to say, why not me?
Hey, very quickly, Omni, you heard Phil Murphy's answer about the Supreme Court. As much as he wishes things were differently, he doesn't want to go through Supreme Court reform. I don't think Biden does either, but is the party going to pressure him to?
He may get some pressure from that, from the left wing, but that conversation's not going to go away. It's never going to go away, right? The economy is their big message right now. As Claire said, they have a good message to deliver, right? Unemployment is low. Inflation is coming down. It's still uncomfortably high. The risk for them, though, is if things get worse. This has to be something that continues to get better for the next year.
And the Fed's going to keep tightening, and we still don't have enough workers. And that both contributes to inflation. Up next, the Supreme Court's rulings on affirmative action and student debt may change who gets a college degree. And there are still some serious divides when it comes to higher education. Data Download is next. Welcome back, Data Download time. The Supreme Court's decision to strike down affirmative action has paved the way for a potentially dramatic change in who gets into college and where they go. This is important because the sharp racial and ethnic divides remain around who has a bachelor's degree in the United States today. And those differences have very real impact on a person's employment and earnings for the rest of their lives. Over the last 40-plus years, the number of Americans who get a bachelor's degree has grown across the board. But the differences across racial and ethnic groups is staggering. Let me show you. We're going to start with Asian Americans here. in 1980, nearly 33% of Asian Americans had a bachelor's degree or higher. That number is close to 56% today. Among the white population, 1980, it was under 20%. Today, it's just under 40%, nearly a doubling, a little more of a doubling, if you will. Then you look at black Americans, it was below 10% in 1980. It is now near 25% in 2021. Hispanic Americans, again, just below black Americans in 1980, and here just under 20%. So you can see these disparities exist quite a bit. Now take a look at it when it comes to earning potential. For folks that have a bachelor's degree, among folks ages 25 to 34, here's your average salary, $65,000. And for every bit of education you don't get is every bit of salary you don't get, as you can see. An associate's degree, less, high school diploma, less, and so forth. And then you look at it when it comes to employment. Look at the unemployment rate over over this summer. If you have a bachelor's degree, you're at 2% of those with a bachelor's degree are unemployed. You look at those folks with some colleges, 3%. If you have less than a high school diploma, you're at 6% unemployed. So it has a huge impact on your ability to get a job. And then there's the college debt issue. Take a look at who has college debt in America. Those holding the most among those under the age of 35, black women at over $11,000. Then it's white women, then black men, then white men, then Hispanic men, then Hispanic women. The point is, both of these rulings could have a huge impact on the lack of diversity in colleges and universities over the next generation. And in the next 10 years, it's going to be fascinating to see how these numbers have changed. When we come back, they are weapons banned by over 100 countries. So why did President Biden decide to send them to Ukraine, even if it means an increased risk to civilians? Welcome back. President Biden did something that has a lot of anti-war activists upset. Frankly, has a lot of folks around the world upset. The decision to send over cluster munitions, Amna, to the Ukrainians. First, let me play President Biden's rationale for why he went ahead and agreed to do something that 100 countries have banned the use of. Ammunition in 100 countries have banned the use of. Take a listen to his explanation.
This is a war relating to munitions and the running out of that ammunition, and we're low on it. And so what I finally did, took the recommendation of the Defense Department.
You know, Amna, he's actually giving voice to something that's been a running issue inside the Pentagon for about the last 3 months, which is the stockpiles are running down.
They are.
Around the entire West.
They are. And it's dangerous because they are burning through that ammunition faster than the U.S. and the alliance can resupply it. It's a real problem in what they have called a must-win war. Let's be clear about what these cluster munitions are, though, right? They basically spread a series of so-called bomblets over a huge area. Many of them do not detonate upon impact and then pose a severe,
almost like abandoned landmines, potentially.
Exactly. Yeah. And we know this has happened. There's been thousands of civilian deaths across the world or maimings across the world as a result of these. The U.S. themselves stopped using them back in 2003, by and large, by the way. So this speaks to both the desperation that we're facing on the front in Ukraine, also this particular moment in time where the counteroffensive is not going as well as they would like it to. Military folks I talk to say this could change the direction of the war, and they're already using these, so why not give Ukraine everything they want? And they did request these. But even some former military folks I've talked to said, look, there's going to be a long and dangerous cleanup after this war. We will deal with this after the fact.
Garrett, a few Democrats spoke out, sent out releases uncomfortable with this. Is this somehow going to impact support for the war, though?
I doubt it. I mean, the coalition of people in Congress and nationally, at least if you believe the polling, is still strongly in favor of giving the Ukrainians what they need here. I think to the degree this becomes a political issue, it becomes another example of the Biden White House having to be kind of dragged towards giving the Ukrainians what they've said they needed, whether it was tanks or jets or HIMARS. There's been this sort of element of like, we will give you what you want only after you really, really beg us for it. That could have a political impact, but I don't think the progressive opposition to giving Ukrainians dangerous weapons they're going to use on their own land, to defend their own territory is going to, broadly change the direction of the political debate here.
Claire, I'm convinced in the next 15 years there'll be more books written about Biden and NATO than Biden and anything in the domestic policy, just because we judge our presidencies by their foreign policy. Yet it's unlikely that success in the war accrues to his benefit, but any mistake could become a problem for him, right?
Well, and he has shown tremendous strength in terms of unifying NATO. And he will go over to NATO and he will talk to all of them and he will use his foreign policy chops and his diplomacy skills, which are really impressive. And he will smooth this over about these weapons. And I think one thing we have to remember about these weapons, first, the Democratic Armed Services Committee embraced this. Mm-hmm. So this is not going to be a huge schism in the party. And second, they're asking to use them in their own country.
Right.
They're not going to use them in another country.
Yeah.
So this is not that you're going to punish innocent civilians you're at war against. This is Ukraine deciding it is worth the risk to hold on to our country, to use these munitions to save our country.
And Brendan, Republicans would have, on the House, at least the more hawkish ones, had they not sent it, would have said, oh, wokeness is somehow hitting the military decisions in a war.
Yeah, and I think the other important dynamic we have to keep in mind is it's not clear that there's going to be support from Congress to continue funding this war forever. Yep. And obviously, Ukraine's success in here relies in large part on the United States footing a lot of the bill. And we've already started seeing a lot of Republicans questioning whether I think there will be more money to come, but it's not forever. And I think Joe Biden is looking at this and realizing we need to win this war quickly before we run out of support back home.
Before I close, Maureen Dowd Garrett had a pretty tough piece on Joe Biden's. It was about sort of the Biden family isn't acknowledging all of Hunter Biden's children. It's 7 grandkids, Mr. President, not 6. I think we've all understand the personal challenge and concern and all of these things that the president has here. But his political foes see this and they're trying to exploit. I mean, there's no doubt every day DeSantis or Trump tries to use Hunter to beat up Biden. How's that world handling it?
Look, I don't think anybody envies the position that the president and his family are in on this issue, because his family and Hunter specifically have become his primary political liability in a lot of ways. I mean, look at the cocaine story from the last week and how many Republicans have tried to seize on that
cheapness.
issue.
It's really kind of ugly the way it's been done.
It's kind of it's certainly kind of a tacky play here. But I mean, look, this is as complex as it gets. To have to, I think all of us here are parents, right? The idea of trying to balance your family's needs versus your political imperatives is just ugly and unpleasant in politics as we're going to get, and we're going to get way down in it.
I was just going to say, this is only the beginning. Yeah. All right, I got to run. That's all we have for today. Thank you for watching. We'll be back next week, because if it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.